Meet Jenna. She's just an ordinary high school student trying to navigate the social maze that comes with being a teenager. You know the drill. Friendships, crushes, schoolwork, the usual. But there's one thing about Jenna that sets her apart from the crowd: her stutter. It's something she struggled with for as long as she can remember. Something that, no matter how hard she tried, she couldn't hide. It wasn't something that made her feel special. In fact, it was often the reason she felt different. It made her self-conscious. It made her doubt herself. And no matter how many times people reassured her, it always felt like the one thing that held her back from truly being herself. But all of that was about to change. Jenna was at an open mic event at her school, something she had been looking forward to for weeks. She loved to sing. The stage was where she felt free. For those few minutes, she could escape her insecurities and be herself. It was her chance to shine. However, as she stood backstage, waiting for her turn, she overheard a conversation that made her heart sink. A group of students, laughing and joking as teenagers do, were talking about who they thought would perform next. Then, one of them made a comment about Jenna. Can you imagine if she sings? With that stutter? It's going to be so awkward. The laughter was loud and contagious. It cut right through the air, and for a moment, Jenna froze. Her chest tightened, her palms got sweaty. She knew that people talked about her, but hearing it so openly, so cruelly, was something entirely different. She thought about walking away. She could back out, pretend like this wasn't happening. She could disappear into the crowd and not face the humiliation that was sure to follow. But then something inside her snapped. Jenna wasn't going to let this moment define her. She wasn't going to let their words steal her spotlight. What if they were wrong? What if she could show them, and herself, that her stutter didn't control her? That she could rise above the shame and turn the situation into something they'd never forget? As she stepped onto that stage, the microphone in her hand felt heavier than ever. Her heart raced, her mind buzzed with doubt, and every fiber of her being wanted to turn and run. But she didn't. She stood tall, took a deep breath, and with a shaky but determined voice, she started singing. The crowd was quiet. You could feel the tension in the room as people waited for her to falter, to mess up. Maybe they were hoping she would. After all, they had already written her off. But what happened next? You won't believe it. Jenna didn't just sing. She captivated the audience. The way her voice filled the room, the passion she poured into each note, it was unlike anything they had ever expected. She wasn't just a girl with a stutter anymore. She was a force to be reckoned with. But remember the cruel comment that sparked this whole thing? The one where they thought her stutter would ruin everything? Well, just as Jenna reached the peak of the song, she stopped briefly and faced the crowd. What she did next, that's the part you need to hear. You want to know what happened, right? You've made it this far because you know something epic is coming. You want to see how it all unfolds. I'm going to tell you right now. What Jenna did next wasn't just a powerful moment for her. It was a lesson for everyone who ever doubted her, laughed at her, or underestimated her. And you'll find out exactly what happened in just a minute. But I need you to keep watching, because what Jenna did on that stage will challenge everything you thought you knew about resilience, strength, and the power of facing your fears. Trust me, by the end of this video, you'll be left speechless.
Why?
Because this is more than just a story about a girl who overcame a stutter. It's about how we all face moments in our lives when we feel small, when we feel like the world is laughing at us, and how we choose to respond. Jenna's story is one of the most inspiring stories you'll hear all day, and it's just beginning. So, don't go anywhere. I promise you, you won't want to miss the jaw-dropping twist that's coming next. Let's dive deeper into the story. What happens when the laughter stops? What happens when Jenna takes back control, turning a cruel moment into the most powerful statement she could ever make? Jenna had always been the quiet girl in the back of the classroom, the one who didn't seek attention but somehow always found herself at the center of it. Her stutter wasn't the only thing that made her feel invisible. It was the layers of doubt that piled on her every day, the ones people couldn't see, but she could feel in every interaction. She spent so much of her time trying to blend into the background, hoping no one would notice her, that she rarely took chances. She kept to her close-knit group of friends, 2, maybe 3 people who knew her well enough to understand the anxiety that gripped her whenever she tried to speak in public. It hadn't always been this way, though. Back in elementary school, Jenna was a go-getter. She'd volunteer for class plays. She'd raise her hand in class discussions, eager to be part of the conversation. But as she got older, the stutter became more pronounced, and the teasing started. At first, it was just kids making fun of her behind her back. But as the years went on, those jokes turned into louder comments, snickers during group projects, and whispers when she walked by. It wasn't just the kids either. Teachers sometimes looked at her with pity, like they didn't know how to handle her. No one understood that the more they made her feel different, the more difficult it became to get the words out. Her family had always been supportive, especially her mom, who would tell her not to worry about what others said. But deep down, Jenna knew her mom had her own battles. After her parents divorced a couple of years ago, Jenna could see the weight of it in her mother's eyes. She didn't want to add to that burden. So, Jenna buried herself in schoolwork, in art, in any activity that kept her mind occupied, hoping she could escape the constant reminders of her stutter. But no matter how hard she tried, the insecurities always followed her. Every time she stood in front of a class or tried to speak up in a group, she'd feel that all too familiar knot in her stomach. Then came the open mic event. At first, Jenna wasn't even sure if she should go. She had heard about it through a flyer on the school bulletin board. Her friends, well, they weren't really into that sort of thing. So it was just her, standing on the sidelines of her own life, watching others take chances she could never imagine herself taking. But then something shifted. One night, sitting on her bed, Jenna saw a video online of a girl with a stutter performing in a talent show. The way the crowd responded to her, the way she held her head high despite her nerves, inspired Jenna in a way she hadn't expected. Maybe she could do this, too. It took days of convincing herself before she even told her mom. When she did, her mom just smiled and said, "You should go for it, Jenna. You never know what might happen." It was that encouragement that led her to sign up. And yet, as she stood backstage waiting for her turn, the doubts started to creep in. What was she thinking? She wasn't the girl who stood out. She wasn't the one who got applause. She wasn't the one who performed on stage. Those were the cool kids, the ones who didn't worry about what others thought, the ones who made it look easy. But then, just as she was about to leave, she overheard that comment. It was like the universe was testing her, pushing her to face her deepest fear, being laughed at. There they were, a group of the most popular kids at school, making jokes about her stutter like it was just another thing to mock. Jenna couldn't move. It was as if the world had paused around her. All she could think was, why do they have to do this? Why does it always feel like this? There was one guy in particular, Lucas, who was the worst. He was the guy everyone else followed, the one who always had the loudest laugh and the sharpest tongue. If there was ever a chance to make someone feel small, Lucas would take it without hesitation. Jenna had always known that if there was a person who would say something cruel, it would be him. And as she heard his laugh ripple through the room, it felt like the universe was telling her she was about to prove something to everyone, and to herself. What Jenna didn't know, though, was that Lucas wasn't the only one watching her. As she hesitated by the stage entrance, there was another figure in the back of the room. A shadow in the corner, someone who had been watching the entire exchange from afar. This person had seen everything, the cruel laughter, the judgment in their eyes, and the way Jenna had been standing there, unsure of whether she should go on. This person, unlike the others, had no intention of laughing, no intention of humiliating her. Instead, they were focused on something far more important, Jenna's potential. But just as she was about to take the stage, she noticed him, Tyler, a kid she'd never really spoken to before, but who she'd seen around school. He wasn't part of the popular crowd, but he wasn't an outcast either. There was something about him, something different, that intrigued her. His eyes met hers for just a moment. He didn't smile, but the look in his eyes said everything she needed to hear. You've got this. Was it possible that he was rooting for her, even though she didn't know him? Was he maybe someone who understood what it was like to stand alone?
Jenna stepped up to the mic.
She could feel her pulse pounding in her ears, the way her hands trembled. She was sure they were all waiting for her to trip over her words. And then, as she opened her mouth to sing, something happened. Something neither Lucas nor anyone else had anticipated. For a brief moment, the world went silent around her. The music swelled, and Jenna took a deep breath. The notes began to flow from her lips, her voice strong, determined, unshakable. She was no longer the girl they had laughed at. She was someone else. Someone who had found her own power. But just as she was reaching the peak of her performance, something else occurred. Something unexpected. Something that would take this story to a whole new level. What happened next? Trust me, you don't want to miss it. Stay tuned because this is just getting started. As Jenna's performance continued, the tension in the room grew, but she barely noticed it. The stutter that usually shackled her every time she spoke faded away in the rhythm of the music. She was in her zone. She could feel the energy of the crowd shifting, the room warming up to her, as if they were realizing that this girl, the one they had once written off, was actually someone who could command the stage. But just as the final notes of the song rang out and the applause began, something else was happening, something darker, just under the surface. Lucas, the guy who had made those cruel jokes earlier, stood frozen in the crowd, his face unreadable. But Jenna didn't have time to focus on him. The crowd's cheers still echoed in her ears, but as she walked off stage, she noticed something that sent a chill down her spine. Tyler, the kid who had given her that look of encouragement earlier, was nowhere to be seen. At first, Jenna thought it was just a coincidence. Maybe he had gone to the bathroom or had left early. But as the night wore on and she tried to find him to thank him for his silent support, it became clear that something was off. He had disappeared just like that. 1 minute, he was there, the next, gone without a trace. Jenna couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. The next day at school, she overheard another conversation, this one about Tyler. "Did you hear what happened to him?" one of the students said, her voice low and filled with curiosity. "He dropped out of school, like, out of nowhere. No one knows what happened. 1 minute he was here, the next he was gone." Jenna felt a wave of confusion wash over her. Tyler had seemed like an ally, someone who understood her struggle, someone who had been rooting for her when no one else was. Now he was just another mystery, and she was left wondering if there was more to his disappearance than anyone was letting on. It didn't stop there. That afternoon, as she went through her phone to scroll through messages from her friends, she stumbled upon something that made her blood run cold. A video had been uploaded online, and the title of it caught her eye. Jenna's big fail on stage. Hesitant but curious, she clicked on it. The video was grainy, but the footage was unmistakable. It was the last moments of her performance, the moment she had been so proud of. But what the video showed next wasn't the triumphant finish she had lived through. No, this video was edited. Someone had taken the part where she hesitated for a split second, just before she started singing, and they had made it look like she couldn't even speak. It was a cruel mockery, designed to paint her as someone incapable of handling the pressure, someone who couldn't even complete a performance without stumbling. Jenna's heart sank as she realized what was happening. Someone was trying to sabotage her. But who? She tried to find out who uploaded the video, but the trail went cold. It was as if the video had appeared out of nowhere, and suddenly, the whispers and rumors started flooding in. People began to treat her differently. The same classmates who had cheered her on the night before now seemed distant, uncomfortable around her. She couldn't help but feel that someone was deliberately trying to discredit her, maybe even trying to make her doubt herself again.
But why?
What had she done to deserve this? And who stood to gain from taking her down? As Jenna tried to process it all, another odd thing happened. A message appeared in her inbox, a private message from an anonymous account. The message was short but chilling. "Stop looking into Tyler. He's not who you think he is." There was no signature, no trace of who had sent it. But the message struck her like a punch to the gut. Was Tyler really hiding something? Was he somehow involved in what was happening to her? Determined to get to the bottom of it, Jenna set out to investigate. She began asking around, trying to find out more about Tyler's sudden disappearance, but no one seemed to have any answers. She approached the people who had been close to him, his former friends, but they all gave her the same story, that Tyler had simply left, without explanation. But Jenna knew better. She had seen the way he looked at her, the way he had stood quietly, watching, waiting, as if he knew something was about to change for her. But now he was gone. It didn't add up. As she dug deeper, trying to uncover more about Tyler's past, Jenna stumbled upon a hidden connection, something she wasn't prepared for. Tyler's father, it seemed, had a reputation in the local community. Jenna had heard whispers about him before, but she hadn't thought much of it. Now, however, the pieces started to fit together in a way she hadn't expected. Tyler's father had been involved in a controversial business deal that had left a lot of people with bad memories, people who had their own reasons for wanting to bury the truth. And it appeared that Tyler, in some way, was caught in the middle of it. Jenna didn't know who to trust anymore. The more she uncovered, the more complicated things became. Was Tyler truly the ally he appeared to be? Or had he been playing her all along? And if he wasn't who he seemed, what about the rest of the people who had supported her? Were they all just pretending, or was there something else going on? With each new piece of information, Jenna's world became more and more uncertain. And just when she thought she was starting to figure things out, something unexpected happened. As she was walking home one evening, she was approached by someone she didn't recognize, a man in his late 30s, dressed in a suit, who appeared to be waiting for her. When he finally spoke, his voice was low, almost conspiratorial. "I suggest you stop looking into Tyler," he said, his eyes scanning the street as if someone might be watching. "Trust me, there are things you don't want to know." The warning sent a chill through Jenna's spine. What was this man hiding? And why was he so determined to stop her from finding the truth? Suddenly, everything felt like a maze. Jenna couldn't tell who the good guys were, or who the bad ones were. All she knew was that someone, somewhere, was trying to keep her from discovering what really happened. But what was it that they were trying to hide? And why did it feel like the walls were closing in on her? Stay with me, because Jenna's journey is just getting more twisted. And as she gets closer to uncovering the truth, she'll face a shocking twist that will leave everyone questioning everything they thought they knew. The answers are coming, but are they too dangerous to uncover? Jenna tried to shake off the feeling that she was being watched, but the sensation clung to her like a shadow. The encounter with the mysterious man had unsettled her, leaving her feeling as if the walls of her life were closing in, suffocating her with unanswered questions. She couldn't stop thinking about the warning he had given her, his words lingering in her mind like a poison. There are things you don't want to know. What could be so dangerous that it had to be kept from her? As she tried to go back to her normal routine, the weight of her discoveries began to take a toll. She couldn't let go of the idea that Tyler's disappearance, and now the threats against her, were all connected to something much larger than she could have ever imagined. But just when she thought she might finally be able to catch her breath, another twist came at her from the most unexpected place: her best friend, Olivia. Olivia had always been Jenna's rock, the one person who stuck by her no matter what. But lately, Jenna had noticed subtle changes in her behavior. Olivia was acting distant, almost distracted, and when Jenna would ask her what was wrong, Olivia would brush it off with a forced smile or a change of subject. Jenna tried to ignore it, focusing instead on the mess that had become her life, but she couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. It was a gut feeling that wouldn't go away. The night after the confrontation with the man in the suit, Jenna received a text from Olivia that made her heart race. "Meet me at the usual spot. There's something I need to tell you." Jenna's instincts told her to be cautious, but she didn't hesitate. She had to know what Olivia knew, because now, it seemed like everyone around her had secrets they weren't willing to share. When Jenna arrived at their usual meeting spot, an old, secluded bench near the park, Olivia was already there, her face pale and her eyes scanning the surroundings nervously. As Jenna approached, Olivia shot her a look that was both anxious and apologetic. "Jenna, I don't know how to say this, but I think you need to stop digging into Tyler. You're getting too close to something dangerous," Olivia said, her voice shaking slightly. Jenna was taken aback, her mind racing as she tried to process what she was hearing. "What are you talking about?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Olivia glanced around again, making sure no one was watching before she leaned in closer. I didn't want to tell you this, but I've been getting messages too. Just like you. The words hit Jenna like a ton of bricks. Messages? What did Olivia mean? How could she be involved in all of this? What kind of messages? Jenna asked, her heart pounding in her chest. Olivia hesitated before pulling out her phone and showing Jenna a screenshot. It was a message, just like the one Jenna had received. Stop looking into Tyler. Things will only get worse if you don't. But the chilling part wasn't the message itself, it was the sender's name. The message had come from an account that Jenna had never seen before. But what was even more unsettling was the fact that the account was linked to someone Olivia knew very well. It was Tyler's father. Jenna's mind raced as she tried to piece everything together. Tyler's father, the man who had always kept a low profile, had somehow become a part of this web of mystery, and now Olivia was caught in the crossfire. Olivia, what are you not telling me? Why didn't you say anything sooner? Jenna's voice was full of confusion and hurt. Olivia looked away, as if struggling with whether to reveal more. I didn't know what to say, Jenna. I didn't want to make things worse. But Tyler's father, he's been involved in things that people don't talk about. It's not just the business stuff everyone whispers about. There's more. Things that Tyler didn't want anyone to know. Jenna felt her stomach churn. She had been digging into Tyler's life, trying to understand what happened to him, but now she was left with more questions than answers. Was Olivia telling her the truth? Or was she hiding something? The uncertainty gnawed at her. Before Jenna could respond, Olivia's phone buzzed again, interrupting the tense silence between them. She looked down at the screen, and her face drained of color. Oh my God, Olivia whispered. It's from him. Tyler's father just sent me another message. Jenna could feel the blood drain from her own face as Olivia unlocked the phone and handed it to her. The new message was short but terrifying. I know what you're doing. Stay out of this, or else. Olivia's hand trembled as she read it aloud. Jenna felt the weight of the threat settle over them like a dark cloud. It was no longer just about her, now it was about her friends too. Someone, somewhere, was determined to silence them all. Jenna stood up abruptly, her mind racing with 1,000 thoughts. She needed to know more. She needed to get to the bottom of this, no matter the cost. But as she turned to leave, Olivia grabbed her arm. Jenna, please, don't go any further. This is bigger than both of us. You don't know what Tyler's father is capable of. Jenna shook her head, the determination in her eyes clear. I have to. I can't just let it go. Not now. As she walked away, the weight of the danger that was closing in on her grew heavier with each step. Tyler's disappearance was no longer just a mystery. It was a puzzle with pieces that were falling into place in ways she didn't fully understand. And the more she uncovered, the more it seemed like everyone had something to hide. Just when Jenna thought she was getting closer to finding the truth, a chilling new piece of evidence surfaced, something that made everything even more complicated. While going through some of Tyler's old social media posts, she found something that hadn't been there before, an encrypted message, one that Tyler had posted weeks before his disappearance. The message was cryptic, written in a strange code that Jenna couldn't decipher. But there was one thing she was sure of: the code wasn't random. It was a message meant to be understood, if only she could figure out how. Could this be the key to everything? Or was it another part of the web design to lead her down the wrong path? With every step forward, Jenna was only dragged deeper into a mystery she wasn't sure she could escape. Tyler, Olivia, and now the threats. Everything was falling apart. The truth seemed closer than ever, yet further out of reach. And Jenna couldn't shake the feeling that, no matter how hard she tried, someone was always one step ahead, pulling strings she couldn't see. What had she gotten herself into? And who could she trust when everyone, even those closest to her, seemed to have secrets of their own? The answers were coming, but they weren't going to be easy to find. And what Jenna would uncover next would change everything she thought she knew. The air felt heavier now. Each breath she took weighted with a sense of dread that Jenna couldn't shake. Every shadow seemed to carry a secret, every corner a danger she wasn't prepared for. The deeper she dug into Tyler's disappearance, the more the walls around her seemed to close in, suffocating her with the truth she was starting to fear more than ever. Jenna knew she couldn't stop. She was too far in, too close to something dangerous, but the fear that had begun as a faint whisper had grown into a constant, gnawing presence in her life. It wasn't just about uncovering the truth anymore. It was about surviving long enough to see it through. Things had escalated rapidly in the past few days. The threatening messages had continued, each one more chilling than the last. The warning from Tyler's father had been clear, but Jenna hadn't let that stop her. She couldn't. Olivia had been right when she said the stakes were too high. But Jenna wasn't prepared for the shift that happened that night. The night she started to realize just how much danger she was truly in. It was late, and she was at home, staring at her computer screen, trying to make sense of the cryptic message she'd found on Tyler's social media page. The code seemed like it was mocking her, a puzzle she couldn't crack no matter how many times she tried. Her eyes were tired, and her mind was racing with possibilities. Had Tyler known something that was bigger than anyone could imagine? Had he found something dangerous enough to get him taken? Just as she leaned back in her chair, frustrated and exhausted, she heard the sound that stopped her heart, a faint knock on her door. Jenna froze, her breath caught in her throat.
Who could that be?
It was nearly midnight, and she hadn't been expecting anyone. She felt the familiar prickle of paranoia crawl up her spine, and for a moment, she almost didn't move. She wasn't alone in the house. Her brother, Chris, was upstairs, but there was something in the stillness of the night that made her hesitate. The knock came again, this time louder, more insistent. Her mind was racing, her heart pounding in her chest. Should she open the door? Should she call for help? Before she could make a decision, her phone buzzed in her pocket, and she quickly pulled it out. It was another message, this time from an unknown number. Her fingers shook as she unlocked the screen. The message was short, but its meaning hit her like a punch to the gut. Stop looking for the truth. You're already too deep. If you don't stop, someone close to you will pay the price. The words hung in the air, thick with a sense of finality. The room seemed to spin as Jenna's mind raced. She wasn't just dealing with threats anymore. This wasn't some vague warning. It was a direct, chilling threat to someone she loved. The gravity of it hit her all at once. Whoever was behind this wasn't playing games. They were watching her, and they were willing to hurt the people she cared about in order to keep her quiet. Terror shot through her like a jolt of electricity, and she instantly regretted opening the message. Her hands trembled as she stared at the screen, unsure of what to do next. She glanced at the door again, feeling trapped in her own house. What if the person on the other side of the door had something to do with all of this? What if they were already inside? She had no way of knowing who to trust anymore, and that thought sent a wave of panic through her chest. Then, a loud crash from upstairs snapped her back into reality. Jenna's heart stopped as she recognized the sound. It was the unmistakable sound of a door slamming open.
Chris.
She didn't even think. She bolted for the stairs, her mind screaming at her to reach him before it was too late. She had to protect him. She had to make sure he was safe. As she ran up the stairs, her pulse pounding in her ears, the house felt different, darker. The floor creaked under her feet as she reached the top, but the silence was deafening. The hallway was empty. No sign of Chris. The door to his room was ajar, and she rushed toward it, her legs moving as fast as they could, but when she pushed it open, her blood ran cold. Chris wasn't there. Her heart sank as she scanned the room. The window was wide open, the curtains billowing in the wind, and the door to the balcony was slightly cracked. Her brother had vanished.
Gone.
Panic surged through Jenna as she rushed to the window and looked out. There was no sign of him. The darkness outside stretched out like an endless void, and for a moment, she felt completely alone, stranded in a nightmare she couldn't escape. Her phone buzzed again, but this time, Jenna couldn't bring herself to check it. The panic was suffocating, clawing at her throat as she realized that everything she feared had come true. The threat wasn't just a warning, it was a promise. Whoever was behind this had the power to make her disappear, to erase the people she loved from her life with no hesitation. She grabbed her phone, feeling the weight of its cold screen in her palm, and dialed Olivia's number, her fingers moving without thought. The phone rang, and she held her breath as she waited for someone to pick up. But the call went straight to voicemail. "Olivia, please," Jenna whispered under her breath, her voice shaking with fear. What if Olivia was in danger too? What if everyone was being targeted by someone who knew them all too well? Jenna's mind raced as she tried to make sense of it all. There had to be something connecting all of this. There had to be some clue, some piece of the puzzle that would lead her to the truth. But as she stood there, staring out into the empty darkness, the truth seemed further out of reach than ever. The weight of the danger pressing in on her felt suffocating, and she realized just how high the stakes were. Whoever was behind this wasn't just watching her. They were in control. And the more she resisted, the more she dug into Tyler's disappearance, the closer she got to becoming their next victim. Jenna wasn't sure how much longer she could keep going. She didn't know who to trust, where to turn, or what to believe. And as she stepped back from the window, her heart pounding in her chest, she knew that everything had changed. The truth was out there, but it was buried deep, and the further she dug, the more dangerous it became. Whoever was behind this wasn't going to stop until they had silenced her for good. Jenna's heart raced as she stumbled back from the window, her mind still whirling with the terrifying realization that Chris had disappeared. Panic twisted in her gut, but as she turned, ready to leave the room and search the house for any sign of him, her phone buzzed again. She froze, staring at the screen for a long moment. This time, it wasn't a random, threatening number. It was a message from someone she had never expected to hear from, Olivia. Jenna felt a cold shiver crawl up her spine as she tapped open the message. "Meet me at the old cabin outside town. It's urgent. Don't trust anyone." For a moment, her pulse slowed as she tried to process what she was reading. Olivia? Why was she suddenly reaching out like this? Why hadn't she said anything earlier, when Jenna had called her in a panic? Was she hiding something? Had she known more than she'd let on about Tyler's disappearance? Jenna's fingers shook as she tried to make sense of the message. The last thing she needed right now was more uncertainty, more things to question, but Olivia's words gnawed at her mind. Don't trust anyone. Was that a warning or a command? Jenna knew she had no choice. She had to go. But as she grabbed her jacket and rushed out the door, a terrible thought struck her. What if Olivia wasn't the person she thought she was? What if this was all part of the game, part of the web of lies that seemed to entangle everyone she had trusted? She couldn't be sure, but one thing was certain. There were no guarantees in this mess anymore. The drive to the old cabin was a blur. She tried to keep her thoughts focused on what she knew, but the questions piled up faster than she could answer them. What was so urgent about meeting at the cabin? Why hadn't Olivia come to her earlier, when she first received the messages and threats? The closer she got to the cabin, the more Jenna's gut told her something wasn't right. She couldn't shake the feeling that this was all leading her into something much darker than she could have imagined. When she finally reached the cabin, the moonlight barely illuminated the weathered structure. It looked abandoned, like something from a forgotten era, hidden away on the outskirts of town where no one dared to go. Jenna stepped out of her car, feeling the cold air hit her like a slap to the face. The silence around her was deafening, the kind of silence that makes you wonder if the world is watching, waiting. Her feet crunched against the gravel as she approached the door, heart pounding in her chest. Every step felt heavy, laden with doubt. She knocked, but the door creaked open before she could even raise her hand. The figure standing in the doorway wasn't Olivia. It wasn't even someone she recognized. Jenna's stomach dropped. The person standing before her was a man, tall, dark, with a face that felt all too familiar. His eyes, cold and calculating, locked with hers, and for a moment, Jenna couldn't speak. The words she wanted to say were caught in her throat, replaced by the suffocating realization that this wasn't just about Tyler or Chris anymore. This was about something far bigger. "You shouldn't have come," the man said, his voice low and smooth, like he'd been waiting for her. Jenna stood frozen, her mind racing. This wasn't part of the plan. What the hell was going on? Was this man involved in Tyler's disappearance? Or was he connected to the threats? And why was he here at this cabin at this moment? I don't know who you are, Jenna finally managed, her voice shaking, but I need to see Olivia.
Now.
The man didn't move, didn't flinch. He just stared at her, the corner of his lips curling into a slight, unsettling smile. Olivia? You mean the girl you've been chasing down, hoping she'd lead you to the answers? He chuckled, a low, hollow sound that didn't feel right. She's not going to help you. She's already gone, Jenna. She was never part of this. It's too late for her, and it's too late for you too. The words hit Jenna like a ton of bricks, and for a second, the world seemed to stop spinning.
What was he talking about? Gone?
Olivia was gone? No, that didn't make sense. Olivia was the one person she thought she could trust. How could she just disappear? Was this some kind of game? Was this man lying, trying to mess with her head? Or was he telling the truth? Jenna stepped back, her breath coming faster now, as the reality of the situation started to sink in. This man, whoever he was, had just shattered everything she thought she knew. He wasn't just some random stranger. He knew about Olivia. He knew about Tyler. And worse yet, he seemed to know everything about her. You've been playing the wrong game, Jenna, the man continued, his tone soft and dangerous. Tyler was never the one you needed to find. You were chasing shadows, thinking you were the one in control. But now, you've crossed the line, and there's no going back. You've been digging into things you were never supposed to touch. You should have listened to your instincts. Jenna felt a wave of confusion crash over her, her mind a jumbled mess of thoughts. Everything had been building to this moment, and she had no idea who this man was or what he was talking about. Tyler's disappearance, Olivia's strange behavior, the threats. None of it made sense. What was the truth here? The man stepped aside, gesturing toward the dimly lit interior of the cabin. Come in, he said. You're not going to get anywhere out here. Her feet moved on their own, hesitant but compelled, as she stepped into the cabin. The door creaked shut behind her, and the chill in the air seemed to grow colder, more suffocating. She couldn't turn back now. But what had she walked into? Jenna had no idea, but one thing was certain. She had just uncovered something far more dangerous than she could have ever imagined. And whoever this man was, he held the key to everything she needed to understand. But as he locked the door behind her, the light flickering in the corner revealed something even darker. On the table, covered in dust, was a picture of Jenna, taken just days earlier, with the words, "You've been watched from the beginning," written in bold, red letters across the bottom. Jenna felt a wave of confusion crash over her, her mind a jumbled mess of thoughts. Everything had been building to this moment, and she had no idea who this man was or what he was talking about. Tyler's disappearance, Olivia's strange behavior, the threats. None of it made sense. What was the truth here? The man stepped aside, gesturing toward the dimly lit interior of the cabin. Come in, he said. You're not going to get anywhere out here. Her feet moved on their own, hesitant but compelled, as she stepped into the cabin. The door creaked shut behind her, and the chill in the air seemed to grow colder, more suffocating. She couldn't turn back now. But what had she walked into? Jenna had no idea, but one thing was certain. She had just uncovered something far more dangerous than she could have ever imagined. And whoever this man was, he held the key to everything she needed to understand. But as he locked the door behind her, the light flickering in the corner revealed something even darker. On the table, covered in dust, was a picture of Jenna, taken just days earlier, with the words, "You've been watched from the beginning," written in bold, red letters across the bottom. Jenna stood frozen in the center of the cabin, her breath shallow and unsteady, as her eyes locked on the photograph in front of her. The message scrawled in red across it felt like a slap to the face, and she couldn't shake the gnawing sensation that she had walked into something far darker than she could comprehend. The man, who had yet to introduce himself but seemed to know everything about her, studied her carefully, like he was waiting for her to make her move. His presence was suffocating, the air growing thicker by the second as Jenna's mind raced, desperately trying to piece together the puzzle that had become her life over the past few days. Why are you doing this? Jenna's voice broke the silence, her hands clenched into fists at her sides as she took a step forward, still unsure whether to trust this man or run. What do you want from me? The man didn't answer immediately. Instead, he reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out something small, something familiar, her phone. Jenna's stomach dropped as he dangled it in front of her, the device now an unsettling reminder of how much control he had over her life. You've been playing the game, Jenna, he said with a cold, almost detached tone. But you don't know the rules. You think you've been chasing answers, but you're just a pawn in something much bigger. The words hit her like a ton of bricks.
Pawn?
She felt like her entire world had been turned upside down in an instant. Jenna had thought she was getting closer to the truth, inching closer to finding Tyler, to understanding the meaning behind the strange threats and cryptic messages. But this felt like a nightmare she could no longer wake up from. He continued, his voice laced with a mixture of menace and amusement. You really think you can just waltz in here and uncover the truth without consequences? You think Olivia was the key? You're wrong. She was never meant to be part of this. She was a distraction, a tool. And you're just a means to an end.
You're too deep now, Jenna.
You can't just walk away from this. Jenna felt the weight of his words pressing down on her chest, suffocating her. Everything she thought she knew, everything she had been fighting for, was now being called into question. Her trust in Olivia, her belief that she could piece the mystery together, all of it felt like a cruel joke. Had she been manipulated this entire time? What are you talking about? Her voice quivered, but she couldn't hold it back anymore. What is this all about? Why me? The man's smile never faltered, but his eyes, those cold, calculating eyes, finally softened, just enough for Jenna to see a glimpse of something she didn't expect. Regret? No, it couldn't be. There was no room for compassion in this twisted game. Because you're the one who keeps asking the wrong questions, Jenna, he said, his words deliberate and slow. You're chasing answers that aren't yours to find. And now you have a choice to make. Jenna's pulse quickened as the man set the phone down on the table between them. She couldn't take her eyes off it, as though it held the key to everything she needed to know. But at the same time, she felt a deep sense of dread. What kind of choice was he talking about? The room seemed to close in on her as the man's words hung in the air, thick with tension. I'm giving you an ultimatum, he said, his voice now carrying a deadly seriousness. You can take that phone, and you can leave. You can walk away from all of this, forget everything you've seen, and we'll let you go. No more threats. No more games. You'll be free to live your life. Jenna's heart raced. The thought of walking away, of escaping this nightmare, was tempting. But she knew deep down that she couldn't. The truth had already consumed her, and she couldn't pretend it didn't matter. The question now wasn't whether she should walk away. The question was whether she could live with herself if she did. Or, the man continued, his voice colder now, more dangerous. You can keep pushing.
You can dig deeper.
You can keep asking your questions, but understand this. You will never have the answers. Because the people you think you can trust, they're not who they seem. And soon enough, you'll be the one who disappears. His words sliced through her like a knife, and for the first time, Jenna felt the weight of her decisions. Was this really happening? Was she really in this much danger? The man in front of her was no longer just an obstacle. He was a warning. He wasn't just telling her what might happen. He was showing her the consequences of her curiosity, the price of digging too deep. Jenna's thoughts raced. Her mind was a battlefield, torn between the desire for safety and the relentless need for answers. She had already risked so much, her sanity, her relationships, even her safety, by pursuing this mystery. Could she really turn back now, knowing she might never get another chance to understand what was really going on? But then, a familiar name hit her like a punch to the gut. Olivia. If this man was right, if everything he was saying about her was true, then what did that mean for Olivia? Was she really gone? Had she been lying to Jenna this entire time? Or worse, had she been part of this twisted game from the start? Jenna felt her stomach churn as the pieces of the puzzle shifted, forming a picture she wasn't ready to see. She couldn't walk away, not now, not when the truth was so close. But the risk was greater than ever. Every choice she made, every step she took, was one that could cost her everything. "You're making a mistake," the man warned, stepping closer, his presence overwhelming. "Don't you see? This is bigger than you. You're in over your head, Jenna. You can't win this." And yet, Jenna didn't feel like she had a choice anymore. She couldn't just back down. Not when the stakes were this high. She looked him in the eyes, the fear still there, but now mixed with a defiant resolve. "I'm not afraid of you," she said, her voice trembling but determined. The man let out a low laugh, and for the first time, there was something almost pitying in his gaze. "We'll see about that." The tension in the room thickened. Jenna was running out of time, and the decisions she made from here on out would decide not only her fate, but the fate of everyone she cared about. There was no turning back now. She could feel it in her bones. The game had changed. The stakes had been raised, and she was about to be pulled deeper into a world she never asked to be a part of. The phone buzzed again. Jenna hesitated, her hand hovering over it. The message on the screen was simple but chilling. "It's not over, Jenna. You've just begun." Her heart raced, and she knew, with sickening certainty, that this was just the beginning. The phone buzzed again, but this time, it wasn't just a notification. It felt like a warning, a final chance to back out before everything went to hell. Jenna didn't pick it up right away. She couldn't. Her mind was spinning, torn between the weight of the truth she was uncovering and the suffocating reality of what it all meant. The room around her seemed to shrink, the walls closing in as the realization hit her harder than she'd anticipated. This wasn't just about her. It never had been. It was bigger. So much bigger. She thought back to everything that had happened in the past few days, the cryptic messages, the threats, the strange man in the cabin, but it was only now, in the most terrifying moment of her life, that the pieces finally clicked into place. This was no longer just a puzzle she was trying to solve. This was a war she was already caught in. And the people she had trusted the most were playing a much darker game than she ever imagined. She stood there, staring at the phone in her hand, fighting the urge to throw it across the room. Every second that passed felt like a lifetime, the weight of every decision pressing down on her chest. The urgency was suffocating, and yet, even as her mind raced, she knew she couldn't stop now. The stakes had risen too high. The man in front of her, this shadowy figure who seemed to know more about her than anyone should, wasn't the only player in this game. The truth was worse than she could have ever imagined. The cabin door creaked open, and Jenna's heart skipped a beat. For a moment, she thought it was someone else, someone coming to her rescue. But when she turned around, it wasn't a familiar face standing there. It was Olivia. Olivia, her friend, the one person she thought she could trust, was standing in the doorway, eyes wide with a mix of fear and something else. Something darker. Jenna's blood ran cold as the realization hit her like a punch to the gut. Olivia wasn't just part of this mess. She had been the one pulling the strings all along. "What are you doing here?" Jenna's voice cracked as she took a step back, her hand instinctively gripping the phone tighter. The room spun as Olivia's gaze locked onto hers, a strange sadness in her eyes. But that sadness was quickly replaced by something far more dangerous, something calculating, deliberate. "I had to make sure you didn't get too close," Olivia said, her voice low, almost apologetic. But there was no remorse in her expression. "You weren't supposed to find out."
But now
It's too late. Jenna's mind reeled, trying to process what Olivia was saying. You've been behind this the whole time? All the messages, everything?" Olivia nodded slowly, her face a mask of regret, but her voice was steady, firm. "You think you've been investigating a simple case? That it's just about Tyler or about those strange messages? Jenna, this is far bigger than that. You don't understand what you're up against." Jenna felt a surge of betrayal like she'd never felt before. All this time, she thought Olivia was on her side, that they were working together to uncover the truth. But now, with every word Olivia spoke, the walls she had built around her trust shattered, piece by piece. The woman standing in front of her wasn't the person she thought she knew. She was something else entirely, something dangerous. And worse, she was in on the conspiracy, deep into it, and now Jenna was tangled in the web. I had no choice, Jenna. You have no idea what you're dealing with, Olivia continued, her voice rising with a hint of panic. You've seen too much, and now there's no turning back. But I didn't want this for you. I never wanted you to be part of this mess. But you pushed too hard. You're in danger now, and there's no getting out. Jenna's mind was racing. The betrayal stung. But the real horror came when she realized the full scope of it all. This wasn't just about one person, Tyler, Olivia, or the cryptic messages. It was about a far-reaching conspiracy that spanned farther than she could have ever imagined. She had been a pawn in a game that was far beyond her understanding. And Olivia? She wasn't a victim. She was a willing participant in this twisted web of secrets. The man in the cabin watched them silently, his eyes flickering with something like approval. But when Olivia stepped toward Jenna, her hand raised as if to calm her, Jenna took a step back. She didn't know who to trust anymore. Olivia had betrayed her, but something told her this man, this shadowy figure who had been watching her from the shadows, wasn't going to let her go without a fight. The tension in the room had become unbearable. Every breath felt like it could be her last, and the phone in her hand felt heavier than it ever had. You're making a mistake, Olivia warned, her voice shaky now, the facade of calm beginning to crack. You don't know what's at stake. You're in deeper than you think. But Jenna wasn't listening anymore. The urgency in her veins, the burning need to find the truth, to understand everything that had been twisted against her, overpowered any fear she felt. This wasn't just about uncovering a mystery, it was about survival. And if she was going to survive, she needed to stop relying on people like Olivia, who had been lying to her all along. Her grip tightened around the phone as she glanced between the two of them. She had no more time to waste. Olivia was right about one thing, they were in danger. But it wasn't just about her anymore. The stakes were higher than she could have ever imagined, and if she didn't act fast, she was going to be swallowed whole by this nightmare. Jenna knew she had one last chance to make it out alive. The decision she made in the next few seconds would determine everything. And as the man in front of her took a step forward, blocking the only exit, Jenna knew there was no turning back now. There was only one way out, and it involved putting everything on the line. Do it, then, Jenna said, her voice steady, but her heart pounding in her chest. Tell me everything. Jenna's breath caught in her throat as she stared at Olivia, her once trusted friend, who stood there, her posture tense, but her eyes full of something Jenna couldn't quite decipher. Was it regret? Fear? Or something much more dangerous? The weight of everything that had happened so far, the messages, the threats, the surveillance, was crashing down on her in waves. She could feel the pressure mounting in her chest, threatening to suffocate her. The man in the room with them seemed to be watching every move they made, his presence suffocating, almost predatory. Olivia, Jenna whispered, her voice steady despite the turmoil inside her. What is this? What's really going on? Olivia took a step forward, her eyes narrowing. She looked like she was about to say something, but the words never came. Instead, the man stepped closer, his gaze locked on Jenna. There was something cold in the way he moved, like he'd been waiting for this moment for far too long. Jenna's hand gripped the phone in her pocket, her mind racing with everything she had learned so far. The last piece of the puzzle was just within reach. She could feel it. You're running out of time, the man said, his voice low and measured. It was as though he was savoring every moment. This was never meant for you, Jenna. You were never supposed to get this far. But now that you have, there's no way out. Jenna's heart pounded in her chest as the full scale of what she was facing finally dawned on her. She wasn't just tangled in some random conspiracy. She wasn't some unlucky victim who had stumbled into a web of lies. No, this was calculated. The messages, the threats, the strange disappearances, it had all been leading to this moment. Olivia's betrayal wasn't just a personal wound. It was part of something much darker, something that went deeper than either of them could have realized. You're not the first one to try and dig too deep, the man continued, his eyes flicking to Olivia for a brief moment before returning to Jenna. And you won't be the last. People like you, people who get in the way, they disappear. Jenna's mind raced, 1,000 possibilities flashing before her eyes. Could it be that Olivia had been working with him all along? Had she known about the danger she was in and led her straight into the trap? Was this the end of her story? But then, something shifted inside her. She wasn't about to let this man, this stranger who had been pulling the strings behind the scenes, control her anymore. She wouldn't let the pieces of her life fall apart because of some twisted game they were playing. There had to be a way out. There had to be an answer. Olivia, Jenna said, her voice firm, tell me what's really going on. Tell me the truth. Olivia's eyes flickered with something close to panic. She opened her mouth to speak, but before she could, the man raised his hand, silencing her. He moved toward the door and pulled out a small envelope, holding it out for Jenna to see. Her heart skipped a beat. She knew that envelope. It was the one she had seen earlier, tucked away in her office. The one that had started it all. This is the truth you've been searching for, the man said, his voice suddenly colder, more final. This is what happens when people think they can uncover things they shouldn't. Jenna's stomach churned as the man tossed the envelope onto the table in front of her. She hesitated, her hands trembling slightly as she reached for it. She knew this was it, the moment everything would make sense. Slowly, she opened the envelope, her pulse racing as she unfolded the letter inside. It was a simple, typed note, but as she read the words, her blood ran cold. I know what you're doing, Jenna. I know who you've been talking to. But it's too late. You've seen too much. You're already a part of this now. There's no getting out. Remember, trust no one. They are all watching. Jenna's mind reeled. The handwriting wasn't familiar, but the words sent a shiver down her spine. This wasn't just a warning, it was a confession. The people she'd been reaching out to for answers, the ones she thought were helping her, had they all been involved? Was anyone truly on her side? Was Olivia just a pawn in this? Or was she the mastermind? Before Jenna could process the full weight of the note, the man moved again, closer now, his presence imposing. I gave you a chance, Jenna, he said, his voice almost sympathetic, as though he was sorry for what had to happen next. But you should have walked away when you had the chance. Now, you're tangled in something you'll never understand. Jenna's heart was pounding in her chest, but her mind was clearer than it had been in days. This wasn't the end.
It couldn't be.
She wasn't going to let them win. Not when she was so close. Not when she knew the truth was right there in front of her. Without thinking, she reached for her phone, her fingers flying over the screen. The man's eyes widened, but it was too late. She had already hit send. The moment the message left her phone, a loud crash echoed from outside the cabin. The sound of shattering glass followed, and the man froze, his expression faltering for the briefest second. But it was enough. A second later, the door burst open. A group of men rushed in, their guns raised, their faces hidden behind masks. They weren't here for Jenna, not anymore. They were here for him. In the chaos that followed, Jenna barely had time to react. She turned to Olivia, who was now visibly shaking, her face pale. What's going on? Jenna asked, her voice barely a whisper. Olivia was silent, her gaze fixed on the chaos unfolding around them. And that's when Jenna saw it, the key, the final twist. Olivia wasn't just a part of this game. She was the target. The real target. Get out, Olivia said, her voice strained. Go. Get out of here. They'll kill you if you stay. You have to leave now. Jenna hesitated, but the sight of the masked men closing in on Olivia made her decision for her. She turned and ran, her heart pounding in her chest as she burst through the back door of the cabin and into the night. As she disappeared into the darkness, Jenna realized that she still didn't know the whole story. The conspiracy was far from over. The game was still being played. And now, she was running for her life. Jenna sat alone in the dimly lit apartment, her eyes fixed on the darkened window as she reflected on everything that had happened. The chaos, the danger, the betrayal. It felt like a lifetime ago, but it also felt like it had just happened moments before. After the cabin, After running through the woods in the dead of night, she had barely escaped with her life. She'd managed to reach out to someone on the outside, someone she had barely trusted at the beginning but had come to rely on when she realized they were the only ones who could help. The police, too, had arrived in time, pulling Olivia and the man into custody. The conspiracy that had plagued Jenna's life for months was finally unraveling, but it came at a price she hadn't expected. Olivia, the person who had been by her side all along, had betrayed her, but in the end, she had also been a victim of this twisted game. She had been coerced, manipulated into playing a part that she never intended to play. Olivia had been a pawn, forced into the web of deceit and power that Jenna now knew was so much bigger than she ever imagined. The whole thing, the threats, the surveillance, the disappearance of key witnesses, it all led to one terrifying conclusion. Powerful people were pulling strings behind the scenes, people whose motives were impossible to understand. And as much as the arrest of the man in the cabin felt like a victory, it also felt incomplete. There were still too many unanswered questions. Too many pieces of the puzzle missing. Jenna wasn't sure if she'd ever get those answers. But she had learned something in the process. She had learned to trust herself. Through the chaos and fear, through every twist and turn of the story, she had never given up, even when it seemed like there was no way out. And now, with the danger behind her, she could finally breathe a little easier. The threats had stopped. The calls had ceased. But still, a nagging feeling remained in the back of her mind. There were too many things left unsaid. She picked up her phone, tapping through the messages she had received over the past few weeks. Messages from anonymous numbers, cryptic emails, and the single voicemail from an unknown caller that she had yet to listen to. Her fingers hovered over the play button for a moment. Was it over? Was this her life now, living in constant fear, always looking over her shoulder? Or was there something more to uncover? Could she ever truly escape the shadow of this conspiracy? The phone beeped at her hand, and she glanced at the notification. Another message. Another threat. But this one was different. There were no words, just a single image. It was blurry at first, but the more she focused on it, the clearer it became. It was a photo of her, taken not too long ago from a distance, just as she'd left the apartment earlier that day. Someone was still watching her. The realization hit her hard. They hadn't forgotten about her. Jenna's heart raced. She could feel the weight of the unknown pressing down on her again, the lingering uncertainty of what could happen next. She had been through hell, but she was alive. And somehow, she felt stronger now, more aware of the world she was walking through. She opened the voicemail, and the first words that rang out in the silence of her apartment made her blood run cold. "You thought you were safe, Jenna, but you were wrong." Her grip tightened on the phone as the voice continued, its tone low and calm, as if it were speaking to someone who already knew the game they were playing. "There's more to this than you'll ever know, and you'll never be free." Jenna's mind raced, and yet, deep inside, she felt an undeniable sense of resolve. The truth was out there. She might not have all the answers, and maybe she never would, but she wasn't going to stop now. The mystery wasn't just about uncovering the truth anymore. It was about fighting for her life, for her freedom, for the chance to live without fear. And so, as she set the phone down on the table and stared out the window, her mind wandered to the future. What would it hold for her now? The pieces of the puzzle were still scattered, the conspiracy still very much alive. But Jenna was no longer the same person who had walked into this tangled mess. She had been forged in the fires of uncertainty, and if this battle was far from over, she was ready to face whatever came next. Because sometimes, the story doesn't end when you think it does. Sometimes, it's just the beginning. And though the world outside felt eerily quiet, Jenna knew she wasn't the only one out there still searching for answers. The mystery, whatever it was, hadn't been solved. It was only just beginning. And as she turned away from the window, Jenna couldn't help but wonder. Who else was still out there, waiting for their chance to play the game? The question lingered in the air, unanswered, as the screen faded to black.